Just over 2 months ago, I had never played or completed a Legend of Zelda game ever, which prompted me to want to complete Ocarina of Time and Link to the Past before Tears of the Kingdom came out. Now, the reason why I wanted to do that was because I wanted to get familiar with the world and the lore, since much of it is actually transferable from game to game. Maybe not the lore, but definitely some of the characters. I do have Breath of the Wild, but I never played it all that much, regrettably so. I probably did a total of 25 shrines, and from that point on, it's just been on my backlog for a good while. So I jumped headfirst into Tears of the Kingdom instead because, well, content. Once I got a few hours into the game, I just kept noticing myself going, wow, every few minutes, and I don't usually do that very often. Since I was already familiar with Breath of the Wild to a certain extent, I could see what changes had been made from one game to the other. The first surprising thing was that this game doesn't actually feel like a sequel or a follow-up to Breath of the Wild. I was describing it to my girlfriend, and the best analogy I came up with is, it feels like an alternate proposal to an open-world Zelda game. It's as if they had to deliver two different proposals for a Zelda game, and they came up with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom at the same time, but released one and then released the other a few years later. Once again, the scenery is just breathtaking. That's something that Nintendo always gets 100% right, and in all honesty, why their games are just so memorable. The first hour of gameplay and the cutscene revealing they're actually in a sky island is visually breathtaking. Obviously, the graphics are pretty much the same since Breath of the Wild, but I do have to say, it's still great. I'm not a person that prefers realism over style, just because overall style can last forever when done right. While if a game is trying to be realistic, you can usually pinpoint its age by the way it looks, and it might not stand out in comparison to other realistic looking games. The way the game looks is perfect for a fantasy style game like this. I would not suggest any changes, it just fits and it's timeless. There's a reason why people will always remember Breath of the Wild, World of Warcraft, Super Mario Bros., amongst many others. They have a timeless style that will never become outdated, and they're known for that very same reason. I've seen some comments and videos online talking about how the Switch is starting to feel a bit dated, and I do tend to agree. The shadows are very flickery, and I can see it being kind of problematic and causing headaches after a while. Also, every time there's a little bit too much going on the screen, whether it's an explosion or too many particle effects, the frame rate just goes bonkers. I mean, it's bearable, but I would just rather it play smoothly. I think it's just time for Nintendo to start working on the next console. I love the Switch, but I don't want to buy an OLED. I would prefer a new and fresh system. The Switch has been out since 2017, and although 6 years is not a huge amount of time, at the rate the industry is going, its age is already showing. I haven't played much of the story. I've been busy exploring and just overall doing fun stuff like shrines, getting towers, coming up with inappropriate inventions, and helping that one dude put up the sign for President Hudson. But the little of the story I have experienced does not make any links to the previous games, except for the initial cutscene because, well, you're quite literally under Hyrule Castle. It was set up really well too. What looks like a mysterious and intriguing exploration really fast turns into absolute chaos. The Master Sword goes to shit and you find yourself at Ground Zero once again. And by the way, that cutscene was badass. Ganon just made Link look like such a weakling, I love it. On another note, surprisingly, I feel like anyone could pick this game up as a first Zelda game and feel like they haven't missed out, which in retrospect, I don't remember seeing any advertising for the game referring to it as a sequel, so I'd say it's a smart decision. It does not alienate anyone looking to start playing this game, only to find out that they have to buy a completely separate game to understand what's going on. When it comes to gameplay, I only have one problem, and it's actually something that I have felt since Breath of the Wild came out. The controls can get really confusing. I don't think this is because of something that the developers did intentionally, but rather because of how controls are usually mapped in video games. Usually, I'd be used to jumping with a B button, but in this case, it's actually the X button. The B button is used for running, whilst I'm used to running by pressing on the analog stick. It's little things like that that kinda get me confused with the controls. But it's not a big deal, it's just something that I struggle with from time to time, but does end up affecting the outcome of my gameplay because if I panic, I end up just clicking the wrong buttons, ending with my inevitable demise. I haven't tried remapping the controls, so I don't know if that's possible yet, but I will give it a go soon because I honestly only thought about doing that as of making this video. I do have to say though, in comparison to Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom actually made huge progress in making item menus simpler. Still quite complex, but much better than the previous game. The way that you had to select different types of arrows, shields, powers, and weapons was just a little bit too much for me. It got in the way of the actual fun parts of the game sometimes. Which brings me to crafting. I'm so happy with what they have done with crafting, It was so annoying to have my weapons constantly break in Breath of the Wild and not being able to get attached to any of them, especially when they looked cool as fuck. But now I'm out here wielding mops with spiky balls at the end of it, wielding the elements and setting the world on fire. It's magnificent. It just brings the overall quality of the game to a whole new level. The developers took a bet on letting people be creative, and boy oh boy did we get creative. From wooden statues with penises attached, soaring through the skies with manually built contraptions, grinding on rails like we're playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 again. But not only that, the unlikely combos, ridiculous looks of certain fusions that actually made me laugh out loud from time to time, and the number of crazy weapon combos you can make is just incredible. And let's not leave out the fact that you can now use items to add additional power to your arrows, either elemental damage or overall just normal damage. The overall system of the types of arrows you get was overhauled, and it works so much better this way, making it possible to use common items to your advantage rather than having to look for specific types of arrows. Breath of the Wild broke the mold in so many ways. But then Nintendo was just like, nah, we're about to flip your whole world upside down yet again, boys. And I can confidently say that they have. I know I mentioned how the controls can at times be confusing, but when I have my head screwed on straight, it just works. The game is incredibly fluid. The movement, the combat, the exploration, it all adds to one incredibly fluid experience that in the end just comes together as a complete package. Tears of the Kingdom, like Breath of the Wild before it, is incredibly fair. If you take risks and you end up coming out on top, you get rewarded. It's as simple as that. And it's funny how it happens too. Most of the time I'd be minding my own business, probably heading towards somewhere specific like either a tower or a shrine, maybe even a quest, and then I'll see a huge structure in the distance and every inch of my body is telling me that's where I ought to go. I'm not going anywhere before I explore whatever that is, so I go ahead and start exploring. Running into danger at this point is a given, but I've played too many Souls games for that to actually deter me from exploring, because I know I'll be rewarded in the end. The danger most of the time just gets justified by the reward. Except when all I get is Opal. That shit is fucking ridiculous, and this is for you, Nintendo. Please stop making me kill 5 enemies and almost dying only to get rewarded with a shitty ass rock. Thank you for your time. The last thing I want to talk about is the towers. When it comes to the towers, I like the way they work, but I find that they both assist in exploration and simultaneously affect it in a negative way. Let me explain. In Breath of the Wild, when you got to the top of a tower, you did usually use it to spot landmarks in the distance and then glide off of it in the direction of those same landmarks. The thing is, you wouldn't glide very far, which would result in you either having to walk the rest of the way or ride your horse. But while all that was happening, you'd come across side quests, enemy camps, caves, all sorts of things. Now, in Tears of the Kingdom, although I understand that we also have the Sky Islands to explore, when you jump off of them, I feel like it's just too easy to head off from shrine to shrine and miss quite a lot of stuff in between. The way that I'm playing right now, I try to be as mindful of this as I can and actually go against it when playing the game myself. But after reflecting upon it, I can definitely see how someone might just fast travel to a shrine in the sky or a tower and then scan for a few more shrines, or just basically glide off into wherever it is that you need to head to at whatever point you might be in the game. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I can never be entirely sure because I only play the game as myself and not as somebody else. When it comes to this, all I can do is theorize. However, just as a word of advice, try not to do this. You'll miss out on loads of good loot, side quests, and overall helpful activities which will only aid you in the long run. And also, it's just a lot more fun. I'll have loads of more content on Tears of the Kingdom coming soon, some of it super different to the style that I've been doing, especially on the creative side of things, so stick around for that if you've enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace!